Good morning from Milano and welcome back to our session. Before starting with the second part of our morning training, I would like to just recap on two highlights from the interventions at our previous session and highlights shared by our panelists, Anna from Inditex and Omar from PricewaterhouseCoopers. Anna, if you can measure it, you can improve it. And Omar, traceability and transparency program are the expression of the values of a company. So we have discussed about how to shape basically a transparency and traceability program and action plan for an organization, for a company. We have looked at how to define objectives, how to identify the scope and the actions and possible impacts, how to identify key performance indicators to measure impact and to keep track of progress, how to work on the governance and on the responsibilities of the people, the resources, human resources that are going to be involved in the implementation, and then the IT, how the importance of technology and IT to support the implementation of an action plan. Now we are moving to a new module, and it is a focus on business process analysis, how basically you analyze the business processes, you identify the key actors in your value chain, you map and analyze your sustainability risks, and finally look into the key data points for the exchange of data, information, and documents with your value chain partners. So for that session, I will give the floor to Virginia Cram-Martos, CEO of Triangularity and expert of the UNECE project team, to lead us through Module 6 for this morning and introduce panelists and speakers. Virginia, to you.
Okay. Thank you. Let's see. Okay. I was told... I only clicked once. Okay. Now I'm going to talk to you about business process analysis. Yesterday I talked to you about traceability and transparency. And we're going to look at it from the perspective of 5 steps. These are the 5 steps that are listed here, and I'm going to go through them. So again, I'm not going to read them now. But I'd like to first talk about why do you want to do a business process analysis, because a business process analysis is a lot of work. And the 2 people who worked on the textile and the leather business process analysis will definitely confirm that statement. Why do you want to do it? Well, because you have to identify the data that you need for transparency and traceability. And the cheapest way to obtain that data is by identifying where it already exists. You don't want to go and create data or ask people to create data if it's already there in an existing document, and particularly if it can already be captured in a computerized format, in a digital format. Also, if you're collecting data from multiple partners, you want to be sure that you're collecting the same data and that you're not missing steps in the chain of traceability. And the best way to do that is to know all of the processes and identify each place where you want to collect that data. So that's what the business process analysis is for in the perspective of traceability and transparency. But there are other reasons that you might want to do a business process analysis. For example, if you want to simplify processes or improve processes, then business process analysis is an excellent way to do that. And that's an added business benefit that you can get from this activity to help justify the cost. So the identification of the value chain that you want to document. Most businesses have more than one value chain, so you need to pick out exactly which one you want to document, and that will depend on the objective of the business process analysis, which will be determined by the claims that you want to make, and Claudia Bernardino will talk a little bit more about that in the second part of this presentation. And you also want to pick up the value chain that will allow you to identify the largest number of processes that you want to cover, and you have to pick one where you have partners that will cooperate, because you need those partners to tell you where the information is. So the next step after you've decided which value chain you're going to document is to look at that value chain and divide it into processes, because the rest of your work on the business process analysis will be structured according to the processes inside of that value chain. And so you want to have processes that are manageable, that have a beginning point and an end point that can be clearly identified. It's also good to have processes that don't overlap. It's more important to have ones that have a clear beginning point and end point than to have ones that don't overlap, but if they don't, it's better. And then the complexity of the process should be moderate. You don't want to have processes that are very, very long and complex, because that makes it more difficult to document. So you want to break it down into chewable bites, so to speak. So you need to take those factors into account when you're dividing up your process, your value chain into processes. This is an example of the cotton value chain and the processes that we've identified inside of that. You'll see there's one process there, finishing, that's actually a whole series of different processes, but from the standpoint of information, the handling is very similar. So you don't have to have a separate one for each activity, dyeing, printing, washing, bleaching, et cetera, because there are tens of different finishing processes. You need to have one where the collection of information is similar, and you confirm it in 2 or 3 of those processes and have a common diagram. So then, in terms of the documentation of the value chain processes, you develop this diagram, which has the name of each process in one of those ovals, and then you have to identify who are the actors, who participates in each one of those processes, and you put those along the sides of the diagram so that you're sure that when you go to the next step, you've included every actor that participates in the process, and you cover every process. The next step is the identification and mapping of the activities. And this results in what are called activity diagrams. Here you want to identify the clearly separate activities, who is doing what inside of each activity, the sequence of activities, and the information flows. And that results in a diagram that looks like this. And most people, they cover their eyes and they say, oh, I can't deal with this, as soon as they see a diagram like this. But I would like to reassure you that this is not a computer programming diagram. It's not so technical. It's a visual story. And so you have to treat it as a visual story that makes it easier to understand than having it written out with before and after and in between and at the same time in a text. And what you can do to understand these diagrams is you sort of follow them along with your finger, so to speak. You start and you say, the process starts with the black dot. That's the cotton farm. And then the cotton farmer, he hires the equipment. That's the first thing he does. And then when he hires the equipment, he has to send information to the equipment supplier. And then he gets the equipment and he harvests the cotton. And then he goes and he bales the cotton. It's a process, and you can follow it through the diagram, and it's a visual story. So that's the important thing to remember about activity diagrams. And then to capture more of the information that's in an activity diagram, the next step is a business process description. And the business process description is a document that goes together with the activity diagram. And so for every one of those boxes that you have in the activity diagram, you have an entry in the business process description. But you also have a little bit of additional information. For example, what is the criteria to begin the process? For example, for spinning, the cotton has to have been ginned before you can start spinning. So that's the condition before you can start the process. And then, are there any parallel processes? Because I mentioned we want to avoid those, but sometimes you can't be avoided. So you have to list the parallel processes and where they overlap, because maybe they don't overlap the entire process. And then in the activity diagram, you probably didn't notice, but each one of those little squares had a number. So like 1.1, crop planning by the farmer, that was, there's a 1, they don't match. But anyway, there should be a box in the activity diagram 1.1. This is crop planning by the farmer. And then you have there more information, like what are the documents, what is the other information, and if you're using it to develop a computer application, you may also want to have what's called a user story, which is who are the actors and why are they doing this? Because that helps somebody who's developing an application to be sure that they meet the needs of the user, is to know why they're doing that activity and what do they expect out of it. Now, it's very interesting, if you have the time and resources to do this, to actually take the activity diagram and the business process description and go to the physical location and follow through on the process. To give you an example, I did this for a project where we were documenting customs clearance activities. And there was a little box that said, we're verifying the customs declaration. And verifying every customs declaration is already a bit excessive. But we went there, and there were actually 3 customs agents, and the person who did the diagram didn't realize this. There were 3 customs agents who were all 3 of them, not in parallel, sequentially verifying the customs declaration, and one of them was actually doing also a physical inspection to ensure that the declaration was correct. And so this was slowing down tremendously the processes, and you only get those kind of insights sometimes when you go and do the interviews in the actual location. Then at the end of the business process description, you have the criteria of what has to have been done to exit the process, and then any common exceptions or problems, and maybe some observations about circular economy actions that could be taken. And then we get to the most difficult and detailed part of the business process description, which you would usually do primarily if you're using this for the process, for a computerization process where you want to computerize the entire process, which is you have to identify all of the documents and the information exchanges, and then each and every data element that's exchanged. So you can imagine that can take a lot of time. You take the business process description, you have each document, you have to do a chart that shows each one of the documents, how many processes use that same document, and then you take the document and you do a spreadsheet that has each one of the data elements. You can sometimes shorten this process if, for example, for traceability, you already know which information you need and you already know what documents it's in. For example, if you know that the traceability data that you need is in invoices, or for example, in some transport document like bill of lading, then you can go through and you can identify every place in the processes where there's an invoice. And there you can ensure that you have the traceability across all of the processes by following through and being sure that every place where there's one of those events that we mentioned yesterday, which is a place that you collect data, that at every place where there's an event that you need for traceability, you have an invoice, or you have a bill of lading. And then you take that bill of lading and you identify all of the data elements and the controls to ensure that the data is valid. So it's a bit of a paradox because I started with a pyramid with the big wide part was identifying the value chain that you're going to document, and the point was at the bottom. But in reality, in terms of data and work, it's the other way around, where you have the value chain takes a little bit of work, but the data elements at the bottom take a lot of work. So how do you take this and move it towards a system for traceability and transparency? Well, we've done what we call a generic business process analysis, which is a business process analysis that shows all of the processes that you need for traceability and transparency. And you can find those generic processes at the beginning of the two reports that we've done on textiles and on leather. But it's the same generic business process analysis. And then you take your value chain and you do what we call overlaying the generic process onto the individual specific value chain process. And so, for example, on the left-hand side, you have a generic process with the yellow star, and then each place where that traceability activity takes place, you can put a yellow star in your value chain, and the same for the green star, and the red star is an activity that's missing. So that way you can identify where there are traceability and transparency information activities that need to take place that are missing. Although I think you'll find that in most value chain processes, all of the information is there, but you have to gather it. You have to harvest the data. And then, where can you find these tools and examples? Well, in the reports that I've been working on with Deborah Taylor and Marco here, and they're going to tell you very briefly what were some of the major challenges that they faced in preparing those BPAs. And this afternoon, you'll get to hear more in detail from them about their individual business process analysis. So I'll just let Deborah say something briefly, and then Marco.
Hi. I guess from the leather value chain perspective, the first big challenge was alignment, was creating alignment with the leather industry experts in that wider expert stakeholder community that we've been working with on what those processes are, the terminology that we should use, and Where we had differences, it was really having those conversations to make sure that that whole wider stakeholder group was aligned with us right from the start. That was one of the key challenges for us. A second challenge that I think the Secretariat and myself shared was that we couldn't do as much as some people wanted us to do. For example, very early on, we were being asked if we could include automotive, and we had to say, no, this is outside of the scope of this project. We hope that we can include it. And certainly the learnings from the project could be adapted to use in automotive, but we couldn't add that to our scope right now. And similarly, we had one of the experts from Europe that wanted us to also make allowances for fur. And that, again, was something that was outside of our scope. We did look at that very closely because it's closely related to leather and the processing of leather. But again, we had to say on this occasion, no, but we may be able to expand into that later. So those were some of the key challenges that we faced.
Thank you, Deborah. And that points out an interesting aspect. The work that Deborah and Marco did was on the leather chains generally and textile value chains generally. So they had to come to sort of a consensus about what happens in all leather chains and what happens in all textile value chains. Whereas each of you, if you're doing a business process analysis inside of your company, you only have to worry about inside of your company, not the value chains of everyone else. Marco?
Thank you, Virginia. Well, of course, most of the challenges that Deborah has mentioned were also my challenges. I just would like to drill down a bit on this last point you mentioned, Virginia, because the first, in terms of time and maybe also in terms of difficulties, a challenge we had to address in the textile part is that the textile industry is so complex and fragmented in terms of organization. And so when we had to decide which was the level of granularity, we had to cut some parts and to decide at what kind of detail to use. And the story you told about, so the business process analysis is telling a story. Well, in some cases, can become as rich as let's say, a book from Victor Hugo with all these details about small things, and on the other hand, can also be complex as a spy story. And the point that's trying to understand which is the right point was the first point. And the second element is about the fact that this difficulty, the complexity of the textile industry, also goes down to each company. So in this sense, you had also to decide what kind of company you have in mind as a standard or as an example, because those people that we will have to make specific BPAs for a specific company will also have to take into consideration then you can have different processes within the same company. So to start to think in a parallel way. And third and last, very big challenge was the fact that in one part of the value chain, I mean, which is very much involved in circularity, the business processes at this moment are poorly developed, and we expect huge changes and developments in the next few years. I'm talking about the post-consumption reuse and recycling part. So in this component, we had to try to also to imagine how companies will behave in the next 5 years. So it was a very tough challenge, I think. I don't know if we have been able to meet all the expectations, but at least, as Virginia said, we had a hard time to find out the right way.
Yes, and they'll talk to you more this afternoon about their processes and the BPAs. And I have to say, the textile was also very complicated because we covered a lot of different kinds of textiles, and the processes before you get to the spinning process are very different between cotton and nylon, or linen, or some other. I think we had 4 or 5 different textiles where we mapped the processes up to spinning, and then from spinning forward, we treated them as more or less the same. And I didn't mention this, but when you're doing the business process analysis in the first part where you outline the processes, you can also add some notes like we did for the finishing part in textiles, where we said, well, this depends entirely on an individual value chain. It could be organized in many, it could take place in many different parts of the value chain, like dyeing. Dyeing can take place when you have the thread, when you have the fabric, even when you have the finished garment. But the inside of dyeing, the process is more or less the same each time it's done. So that's, I forgot to go to these slides. Here we go. And now we come to the next part, which is defining, which I mentioned earlier, which is defining the sustainability claims with credibility and traceability. And Claudia Di Bernardini, who is our legal expert on this project and who has done all of our work on claims, is going to give this part of the presentation.
Thank you very much, Virginia. Hello, everyone. Here we go. Yes, we are going to see together the work that we have conducted within the UNECE project on claims, and we're going to do that also discussing with our speakers today that will introduce you later on. So yesterday we have seen that traceability is a co-enabler of sustainable value chain, since can contribute to the 3 dimensions of sustainability. And even if sustainability is independent from traceability, in order to make an accountable claim, traceability is strictly linked to sustainability and acts as a foundation. In fact, sustainability cannot be achieved without the relevant information being supported by data that prove the reliability of the claims made by the company. And this is why already, since yesterday, we heard about claims a lot. So a claim can be on a product, on process, or an organization, and of course it refers to the hotspot, to a hotspot analysis, to a sustainability risk that want to be taken into consideration. And later today, we also are going to discuss sustainability risk. So the main objective is, of course, to make, to let consumers, if we talk about B2B claim or business partners in purchasing decision, informed purchasing decision, and choose products that best meets their needs and expectation. And to achieve this goal, it is important that the information behind the claim is clear, is useful, and is reliable. This is easy to say, less easy to realize. This because the garment and footwear industry faces a wide diversity of claims. According to the European Commission, there are more than 200 active environmental labels in the EU, more than 450 active environmental labels worldwide. There are also more than 80 widely used initiative and reporting methods for carbon emissions only. And this, of course, creates confusion among consumers, confusion amongst company, amongst all stakeholders that cannot really understand the level of reliability and sustainability issue covered by the claim. And as a result, this creates a lack of trust between the actors. And the lack of coordination, of credibility and comparability among sustainability claims is a critical issue in advancing sustainable development. I would like to show you in this slide a screening website on greenwashing that was conducted in January 2021 by the European Commission. It's called SWIP, actually, on green claims, green online claims. This year on garment was made by the European Commission together with the authority, the national consumer authorities. And what were the main findings? First of all, that more than half of the cases that were taken into consideration lack sufficient information for consumers to judge the claim's accuracy. 30% of the cases had vague and general statements such as conscious, eco-friendly, sustainable, and in 59% of cases, there were not easily accessible evidence to support the claim. So this is the current scenario right now, at least dated at 2021, January 2021. And that's what showed that greenwashing is a huge problem to be solved, especially in this industry. So here, you can see other initiatives, because actually the screening website on greenwashing is just one of the several initiatives that the European Commission put in place to substantiate green claims, to empower consumers on more informed choices. We do have a legislative proposal on substantiated green claims that was launched in 2019. We do have the textile strategy that will be adopted by the end of 2021, that will address claims as well. The new consumer agenda of 2021, and this was already, this topic was included in the Circular Economy Action Plan of 2020 and in the European Green Deal the year before, in 2019. Also, we will have a new Unfair Commercial Practice Directive, a revision of the Unfair Commercial Practice Directive. So lots is happening in terms of substantiating green claims. There is a lot of attention on this topic, and this is why also we found that was important to give priority also to this topic in particular. We dedicated the chapter on the sustainability claims in our implementation guidelines of the policy recommendation. We also provided we also developed detailed guidelines for the partners of the blockchain pilots that joined the pilot on cotton and now join now the pilot on leather, really to provide them with a tool for developing their claim in order to support them in the development of the claim, but also in the data collection that can be very complex and so prove the information, again, that is behind the claim. And here you can see what is included, what has been included in the implementation guidelines. First of all, a definition of claim. That is a high-level statement about the characteristic of a product or about the process or an organization associated with the product. And then we also wanted to lay down some fundamental component of a claim in order to make a claim, a valid claim. A claim should contain this element: a clear objective, which laid down the purpose of tracing and the requirements to be met in order to reach the purpose, a description of the traceable asset of the proposed claim, a description of the claim, so the claim statement. The claim should state and describe the physical characteristic or processes connected to the traceable asset and the verification criteria. That is actually the most relevant element. Because it provides assurance that the requirements of a standard or guidelines or other document which describe that the characteristic of a product, process, or organization are met. Now, I won't go into the details of the content of a sustainability claim. Okay. But it has to be made clear if the claim refers to the whole product or only specific elements or the whole company or only one or more products of that company, if it addresses the entire life cycle or just one stage of the life cycle, and then the target audience is if it's a public facing or business-to-business claim. Here are some criteria. So we decided to lay down a number of identified criteria to develop claim in order to announce really the value and effectiveness of claim. You can see them listed here. So a claim needs to be clear, first of all, understandable. So it doesn't have to use that vague expression that we found in the other slides, such as environmental friendly or conscious or sustainable. It has to be accurate, and I would like to focus on substantiated. That is probably the most important one. You will see tomorrow when we're going to discuss about the pilot project, how it's important to have data to support the claim, and the claim needs to be verified. So substantiated is probably the most needed, the most important element in order to develop reliable claim. Visible and accessible, if we talk about consumer consumer claims, go beyond regulatory compliance. So it is important that it exceeds what is already required by the law and does not have to create any undue transfer of impact, meaning that should not enhance one aspect where the product is performing well while masking other aspects where the product is instead performing poorly, and updated. It needs to be regularly updated, revised as necessary in order to reflect the changing circumstances. And these are just, we identify just a minimum. So some criteria that need to be met, but claims also can go beyond simply informing the consumer. We will probably see that today with one of our speakers. They can actually encouraging also consumer to adopt new and more sustainable consumption pattern. Could define also what the consumer can do to reduce negative sustainability impacts, can also allow consumer to trace how the sustainability claims were generated, or is possible also to have a multimedia approach, so address consumer through different and innovative communication channel in different situations, and so give consumer the possibility to interact. And here, some example we found was useful for you to have example to look at. So in the implementation guidelines of the policy recommendation, you will find some suggestion of how to make a reliable claim. And here are some examples starting from the requirement, the component of a claim that we identified and we included in the implementation guidelines. So the traceable asset, the claim state, the verification criteria, and objective. But now, after this very short introduction, I would like to leave the floor to our speakers, Emanuele Riva and Simon Giuliani. Emanuele Riva is Vice Director of ACCREDIA, the Italian authority for accreditation of certification body, and Simon Giuliani is Global Marketing Director at Candiani Denim. And I would like to leave the floor to them because they can provide us both industry perspective and the perspective of the accreditation body on the claims. So it will be interesting to discuss with them policy and industry action on empowering consumers and business on sustainable consumption and production. So, Emanuele, I would like to leave the floor to you first and to present yourself. And also, I would like to mention that ACCREDIA developed with UNI, the Italian standardization body, and with the support also of the Italian Minister for Ecological Transition, a pre-normative document that is called Ethical Claims of Responsibility for Sustainable Development, that provide a list of control points to guarantee the validity and also the credibility of claims. This is a very interesting document, and I really would like you to provide us with an overview of these guidelines. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudia. So I give you just a couple of words on who is ACCREDIA and who is IF. ACCREDIA is the Italian accreditation body, is the authority in Italy that accredit the certification body, inspection bodies, and laboratories. IF is the international network on accreditation, so the body that have the overview on all the activities in conformity assessments. This started some years ago on the basis of an ISO standard. This is the standard 7233 on ethical claims. These standards take in consideration three main subjects. It is the sustainability claims, the welfare, the animal welfare, and the economical justice. So this standard is, of course, generic because it's high level, and it was needed to put this on the ground to give more details. This is the reason, the background of this standard is, the main point is, how do we know which claims are true and what they really mean? So that's the focus of the standard. This standard has been developed by with ISO Capolco, that is the task force with stakeholders in ISO. It's the first standard issued in the conformity assessment environment with the involvement of stakeholders in so high level. So it's good to take in consideration because this goes exactly to the point. It's not interested on the mechanisms that are around the company, but goes exactly to the point that is the claim the point. So this is the standard issued by UNI that is available on the website. After we will show you the link. Which are the main points of on the standard? This is a pre-normative document that is considered a product of the standardization according to a European Directive 1015. So it's something official, we can say. It's not just only something issued by one part. And we developed this in UNI, also in Italy, with the involvement of the Ministry of Ecological Transition. And also with UNECE. UNECE was around the table. So the main points are, in order to have this claim, you have to, according to sustainability, you have to take into consideration the 3 pillars, economic, environmental, and social, not just only one, 3 pillars. Of course, you have to understand which is the most critical in your case, so you need materiality analysis in order to understand which is the real need of the stakeholders. This is to avoid misleading, greenwashing, and so on. There are the control points that are reliability, transparency, relevance, involvement of interested parties, equity. So we don't have time now to go into details. However, you can download the standard and you can read directly all the control points that you can find it. It's important also to understand who make the control of the claims and which are the steps. Of course, the claims is short. It's 3 words, 4 words, but you after on the back, you need to have a program. You need to have a statement that describe exactly which is in the background of the claim. It's not just only 3 words. You have to describe very well which are all the steps that you can guarantee with that claim and how that claim can be controlled with independent and continuous verification. So we have to change from the real to the commercial. We have to try to come to the ground. Just a summary, so we have a framework of standards. So it's not developed just only from one company, from one party, but on a table of standardization bodies recognized by the state. We need the real presence of the 3 elements of the sustainability, social, economic, and environment. Is needed the materiality analysis in order to avoid misleading and greenwashing. And you need an independent and competent verification of the claim. And here you can download the standard for free from the website of UNI in English and Italian.
Thank you. That's really, really interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Emanuele. Yes. It is definitely a very interesting document, I would say, for a company and accreditation and certification body as well. And so I would like to know also if these documents was already used by companies, which companies are starting to making claim based on these guidelines. That would be.
Yes, so far we have 3 main examples. One is an example considered the topic of today. We are here on the screen, textile and leather. I'm happy to explain this project made by the Italian tanning industry. The claim is that they try to verify is we recover our leather from the food industry. So this is short, but on the back of this, you mean you have to need to have the traceability. You need to explain which is really the value. They made a lot of studies. For example, just to give you some numbers, 8 million of tons of leather every year will go in dump if not used. You will have no life saved from the slaughtery if you don't use the leather. So this is the main points of the claim. So you have 100% of the leather is regenerated, is reuse of a product that should go in dump. So this is the basis of this claim that they are trying to validate. It's not yet validated, but trying to work on this. Another claim is get it fair. And this is more focused on the company and how this company is challenging the ESG goals. So it's more broad. It's not just only short, but it's more broad and it's more complex because you have to demonstrate how the company is in the right direction with ESG. And this has also a good connection with the sustainable finance. Today, we see, as the greenwashing in this field, we have also greenwashing in finance.
Yes.
So
and
this is a way to create, to make some things clear. And the last that they are starting to think about is regarding the ingredients of food. The food industry is really focused on claims. When you buy something, you always find claims on the product. So check if that claim is correct.
Yes. That's right. And also, you mentioned the leather, this claim on leather, and we just heard from Deborah, this is the the expert on the leather value chain. We have a pilot also on that. So actually, the company are making claims. So this is very interesting what you just said, and very useful. So before asking you other questions, that maybe later on, and ask also the audience if they want to. Make us question. I don't know if there are any questions already from the audience that we need to address before. Okay, before I give the floor to our next speaker, Simon Giuliani, Global Marketing Director at Candiani Denim. That is also one of the companies of the Monitor for Circular Fashion. Yesterday Francesca presented the report of the Monitor for Circular Fashion, so we're happy to have also today another company of the Monitor. And so I would like to know, for someone like you, like your company, who develops and produces sustainable innovation, how do you communicate your achievement at the B2B and B2C?
Thank you, Claudia.
And welcome, first of all.
Thank you. And thank you for the opportunity to share with the audience our approach to claims and how to get the message through to the end consumer. Basically, we are a denim fabric producer since 1938. We're in the 4th generation today. And we don't just face the challenge of doing constant R&D innovation, which gave us the position of leadership in sustainable innovation in our segment, but we also face the challenge that we have to get that innovation through to the consumer. So how can we explain it? How can we claim the benefits of such innovation? So I would like to start with a small example that I think everybody can identify with, and if I can ask for your help.
Of course.
I just want to show quickly something.
Happy to help you.
Would you want to hold this one, please? Thank you. So,
great.
Very simply, you see two jeans, right? And they pretty much look the same. So,
yeah, they do.
From a consumer perspective, they're probably the same, right? But one of them costs more than the other. And if you're not really from the business, you don't know why. And you can't really find any more explanations about it, you probably go for the cheaper one, right? That's what I would do, okay? So this is pretty much the photograph of where we are at today in the fashion industry. There are products that can be made better or not so good, but there is no way to motivate them to understand how to make a purchase, how to be conscious about that. So this is where I want to start actually to show what, for example, is the difference between these two guys here, which, as you saw before, thank you very much for your help.
Thank you.
The concept is, what are they worth for real? Okay, and there's just one way to find out about it, and this is when we go technical. Right? On a technical level, we can see actually that these two garments are made in two different ways. We're talking about technology, about sourcing strategy. There are different ways that allow us today actually to deliver the same aesthetics, the same performances, the same durabilities, but having consumptions, in this case, if we talk about water and chemicals, for example, which are actually very important in the impact when we talk about denim production, reduced by 75% and respectively 65%. But you've seen also a lot of percentages being thrown around in the business, right? You go to shop for something, it says like, oh, this is 20% less water, less chemicals. So the thing is actually, I want to bring an example now of what has been, for example, our most significant innovation that we've done in 83 years. Basically, recently, we finally developed a 100% natural stretch denim technology. Okay, it's the first of its kind, and it's made with natural, regenerative raw materials. Through technology, actually, we can allow to be this jean 100% biodegradable and compostable. So, a great milestone for us, but how can we tackle that? How can we tickle that through to the consumer?
Yeah.
And so basically we start in 3 tiers of communication. That's what we do. The first one is merely technical, because the thing is that how can I tell you that something is better if you don't know how it's done conventionally? So how can I give you this, explain this extra benefit in terms of sustainability? So at that point, we need to know who we speak to. If we talk, we're a supplier on a B2B level, so we talk to CSR people in the company. We have, in this case, for example, a patent in place. We have the certifications that come from third parties tests that run all the tests of biodegradability, compostability according to European guidelines. We have also biodegradability tests done in marine environment and so on. And then we actually have to go tell the designers, the decision makers, what is this good for? Where's the benefit of the whole thing? And so we create a different communication where we go into depth, still on a technical level, but simplified enough in order to see the benefit also on a commercial level. You can start seeing that in your product, in your store. Oh, I think we could sell this better, because that's the real end goal for brands today. So we show, for example, the difference between what a regular stretch denim looks like when you throw it on the ground and what a Riva stretch denim looks like when you throw it on the ground. So one disappears 100%, the other one stays there for 200-300 years. And basically just reduces itself into small microplastics that won't ever disappear. So we have different ways of going into depth in explaining what we're doing, the benefits of the fabrics, the benefits that actually the brand can have from that by working with that. And then we even go on a very simplified level. So we actually try to go directly to the consumer. We create a website where you can find all the data. So if you actually find that jean in the store of a brand that uses that technology and you want to look it up, you find actually all the detailed information, again, on 3 tiers. So basically you can go into all certifications. You can look at all the material that has been produced, the scientific data this claim is based on, right? So, but this is the big challenge that we're facing today, because I want to remind everybody that we are not a brand, we are an ingredient brand. So basically we are doing basically a lot of that work already for the end consumer, so for the brands. So we think that everyone in this value chain should do his job. We're trying to do ours. Brands need to pick that up and probably actually try to transfer that further. The only way you can do that, though, is by understanding. So this is why today, more than ever, education is key. It's actually the only tool that allows us to really get people in the position to understand and therefore to appreciate the innovation and communicate it further. And I want to show you this video, which actually sums up everything on an even more simplified level, but based still on scientific information. So fashion, innovation, circularity in 30 seconds. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. So Simon, actually, you just show us that there are different levels and different language that apply to different actors. So you just say that you have a B2B way to communicate your claims, the claims, the Candiani claims, and the B2C level, because they need to be different, right? They need to, they have a different audience, so they need to reach, even if they both need to be clear, reliable, understandable, but then there are different ways to communicate, and this is also very, very important, what you just say. And you mentioned also consumer awareness and education, so I would like to ask you something more about that specific point, because I believe on one side there are policy actions that are needed, and there are a lot of initiative at the European level. We mentioned that before, and that are happening, but also, and so we probably will have mandatory labeling requirements soon. We'll see what is going to happen from a regulatory point of view, but also there are lots that the industry can do, and I believe consumer awareness and education is one of the key, probably, tool that can be put in place, a key action that can be put in place by the industry. So what do you think of that?
Well, I think, as I said before, education is necessary today in order to help people to understand and appreciate actually what innovation really is. So the thing is, actually being a B2B company, like we started 10 years ago to do build an education platform within the company. Since we're completely vertical and we have all the departments of production in-house, we have basically a course for brands, so for companies that make fashion, to basically come to know what is the standard way of producing and what is the delta that makes it actually more sustainable. Because this is where you got to start. If you talk about a benefit in terms of sustainability, it requires people to know what the standard way of operating is. So there's a lot of information that is required, a lot of attention that is required. So this is like a crash course that we offer at the company for 2-3 weeks, basically. It lasts 2-3 days, sorry, not weeks. Otherwise it will kill you probably. And the thing is actually that we started to do, the request exploded for this. 10 years ago, there was not really an interest into visiting suppliers and coming to understand the supply chain. But we saw actually that five years ago, the interest like really increased, and we started to have like over 1,000 visitors per year. And we're talking about not visitors, we're talking about like industry experts coming actually to do this whole crash course. And so we started to do also an open mill day once a year for like to open up to a broader audience. This is how we are trying to, please allow me to put it in these words, to make education sexy somehow, because this is what brands understand. And this is actually how it could become a driver for them for sales.
Yeah.
So if education becomes a driver for sales, well then it's when we hit the nail on the head.
Yeah, definitely. I just want to put this question on and see if you want to address them or if there are questions from the audience, because we've seen with you, Simon, some relevant challenges and how actually Candiani is dealing with it in a very powerful and good way. And there are also, of course, opportunities. So I'd like you to ask us also about the opportunities. What is the return on being like a company as Candiani that is so that is transparent, let's say, that is work on this specific aspect of traceability and transparency. So the opportunity is really on communicating product sustainability related information.
Well, I think there's the aim is always to create a win-win situation. Mm-hmm. So basically, I think for us, the opportunity was to really open up the doors to what we're doing and showing how we're doing it. This is something that's never been done because there was always a secrecy about our innovation, which was, I totally understand. But on the other hand, being literally one, like the last of the Mohicans producing vertically in Europe, this was a necessity to explain why our product is different. And so it was a very important decision that was taken within the company to actually start to do a marketing that educates about what we're doing differently, because it was necessary to do that in order to have our clients understand, but also give them the tools to differentiate their product in a increasingly saturating market. So basically, this is where when the interest started to be generated by brands, because the market started to get saturated, and they said, how can I differentiate my product? I need to tell how it's done. Yeah. And so basically, we supplied already information that would allow them to differentiate their product. And this is when it became a driver for sales, and this is when it becomes profitable on all levels. And this is what we have to do, I think, all in a joint action, also as Anna said before, basically from industry to distributors to end consumers, basically to create a value chain that transfers all this information, all this R&D and all this efforts down to the end consumer that can actually appreciate it at that point and understand how to choose better. Because what we want to do is actually we want to put the people in a position to do a more conscious choice when they approach a purchase.
And it's about collaborative effort. We heard that a lot as well today and yesterday. So coming back to you, I would like to know what you think, what in your opinion are the action that should be instead put in place by governments to improve the value and effectiveness of sustainability claims, because we heard that there are many, again, initiatives, also these guidelines, this standard is very important, but it's voluntary. So what about what governments should do provide clear guidelines, set mandatory labeling requirements, again, have stronger consumer law protection laws.
Yes, thank you. The point is, it's a matter of time for me. If we have time, we could wait that the consumer raise the awareness. So happy to listen that it's important to educate, to make education sexy. So I'd say it's a good concept, but it's a matter of time. If you have time, we could go in this direction. We can wait that the consumer will increase the awareness. It is increasing, of course, it's increasing a lot. But on the other side, the government has to underpin this process. They have to stress the process, to accelerate. So we need education of who makes the law. So not just only the education of the consumer, also education on the legislative level. When they will understood, they have to tell us, I'll give you some example. Is it better electric or hybrid or hydrogen, organic is sustainable or not? So the scientific has to provide us these answers that are not easy. We understand that they are not absolutely easy. When we will have this answer, legislation will have to push the process. And in order to push the process, they have to set the minimum requirements on transparency, on sustainability, or on the main points that are needed. So awareness is important, but it's not enough. Yep. Awareness of the consumer is important. We need awareness and education of the legislator. And after, when we will have a level of understanding, then it's important to push something more with some law that will go to the points, the point that we need. Not to forget the boundaries, but to go to the point that is needed with some law.
You actually mentioned some keywords that were in our project all the time, because it's definitely important to have minimum data, minimum requirements. You mentioned about having a common language also. It is very important to have a common understanding language. So we need to focus on that as well. So we need that probably from governments to receive answer. Yes. At the same time, I believe it's also a lot about consumer awareness, as Simon was mentioning, but because consumers are already there. Yesterday you weren't here, but Francesca has already mentioned that there was Guru, a woman from the Generation Z, and they're actually ready. It's this kind of generation. And
they can actually make a change.
They can make it. They want to make a change.
But I think, as I said before, it has to be a joint collaborative effort, because I totally agree.
Yes,
I
also
totally agree.
Business awareness.
And this is also what we saw this morning about in the polls, for example. Like, would you just disclose everything about your company, or would you need also a roadmap of policymakers that helps you to channel that? Absolutely, yes. Like, we need education of the policymakers. We need policies also, because what I just showed you here is the message from one producer about his innovation. All right, there's a lot of guys out there doing a great job, all right? And you cannot expect that every consumer gets different messages wrapped in different ways and then makes his choice. So this is why we need a guideline where everyone can actually say, like, oh, this is part of that guideline. So it's something I should listen to, all right? This is the first step that has to be taken. Yeah, also, we always talk about educate consumers and also educate business. I think together with consumer awareness, there is business awareness. Create business awareness is as well important. But then we do also have this legislator awareness, I would say, that it's never mentioned. So thank you for raising up, because it's a very interesting point on my opinion. And we also received some questions from the audience, so I would like to read them and see. So there is one question from Espicion Oliveira Gomez from the Organization of African, Caribbean, and Pacific States. And I would like to ask, when we mention about the criteria that a company has to respect in order not to have misleading claims, it refers, I believe, on these slides. This one, we mentioned that one of the criteria that we UNECE have identified is go beyond regulatory compliance. So it's asking what this exactly means. So basically,
if it has to be a claim, and I'm sure Emanuele could confirm that, if it has to be a claim, it has to go beyond what is already required by the law. For instance, if we mention the REACH regulation, that it's a regulation that we all know in this sector, in the garment sector, because it's a very important one, then the product, in order to be able to access the market, to go to the market, needs to be compliant with the REACH regulation. So mentioning the REACH, if the claim is on the REACH, that's not really a claim because it's not going beyond what is already required by the law. If that product is not compliant with the REACH regulation, then it simply cannot be in the market, right? Cannot go and sell in the market. So, but I would like to hear from you, your point of view. I mean, if the guidelines that ACCREDIA develop are on the same page, let's say.
Yes, in the same point, we agree absolutely. There is a specific point. Does it express simple legal compliance? It's not a claim. It's not a claim that it's a claim, but it's not a claim that can be verified under these standards. Yeah. So it's not needed to verify the compliance to the law.
You have to be compliant with the law. So
it is not up to us. It's up to legal police to do this. It's not our role. Our role is to verify what is behind, what is more, not just only the minimum level that is for the police.
Yes, and when we talk about sustainability claims, we want to go beyond what is required. We want
the most important thing in that discussion is like, what do you take as a benchmark?
Also,
because if we talk about denim, for example, like more than 66%, then all the jeans in the world are produced in 5 countries, which are Turkey, India, China, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. So basically, what is the local regulation that they have to comply with there? What is the local regulation we have to comply with here? Like what most of the people don't understand in the business is that if we do certain things, we go to jail.
Yeah.
And that doesn't happen in other countries. So complying with regular law, that is like a base. And then on top of that, what is the benchmark? When we talk about consumption of water, are you implementing already certain things? Or you start now to implement things that should be a default and you actually use them to communicate that you better something? Yeah. That is the big difficulty today to understand.
It's a challenge, of course, definitely, And in fact, it has to be taken into consideration, the country of production and consumption, both of them. Do you want to add something?
Just to add one word. There is now, consider the policymakers, there is a directive under development that is under the due diligence. And this project is to put at the same level all the products that are coming in Europe. So if these jeans are being produced in Bangladesh, they have to fulfill the rules of the market where they are going. So in this project, the European Commission, we could have some elements that could help to at least to have the same level of compliance with the goods that are in Europe.
I think that would be the least it would be very fair to the consumer to put it on the same judgment level.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have a question from you, from the audience, that I would like to address you, Simon. First of all, it's from Tasha Sarkarser-Diordina. She's volunteer for HXN. And she would like, first of all, thank you for the great presentation and video. So she really appreciated it. And she would like to know if it could be relevant at some point, at some stage, and possible to communicate your performance versus industry average or best practice, and not just the ultra-traditional versus new.
So thank you very much, first of all. This is something that we're always trying to avoid, I think out of cavalry reasons, I guess, because like, we're not going to point a finger against someone who is producing according to no standards. What we show also in this comparison that we do is basically how we produced 15 years ago. So basically 15 years ago, and I remind everyone that our factory is based 35 kilometers from here in the nature reserve called Parco del Ticino, where regulations and restrictions are unlike anywhere else, like in the denim industry. So we have weekly inspections of the nature reserve. So basically, 15 years ago, we already produced with high standards. So we compare ourselves with high standards that we had back in the days. If we would compare ourselves to what is going on today in certain factories in the 5 countries that I mentioned before, we would have completely different data. But we want to inspire, we want to stimulate, we want to educate. We don't want to say like the other ones are bad and we're good, because I think this is like a strategy that won't pay on the long run. So if there would be the way, and this is what I think we're trying to do here, to set some regulations for the whole industry, well, then this problem would be set, because then you compare yourself with industry standards that would be required. At that point, like, it would be also better for me to compare my innovation to an industry standard that is internationally recognized.
Perfect. Yeah.
And for the consumer, obviously, would be the greatest benefit.
Yeah. So here are some thoughts on how to move forwards, guidelines on claims, sustainability labor requirement. We discussed about consumer awareness and dedication, but also business awareness. The need probably of something harmonized, as Simon was mentioning. A common methodology to measure product impacts and sustainability, creating industry codes, tracking technology, because we don't have to forget blockchain can really support, for instance, that consumer engagement is important as well, and communication approaches. We've seen with Simon today also way to communicate and different communication approaches. And in order to conclude this section, I would like to say that sustainability claims can really be seen as an opportunity, a creative opportunity. We have heard today a story from Simon, so it's possible to share story of sustainable production and consumption through claims. So they can be a powerful tool. We talk about language with Emanuele also. The narrative of the sector need a common language, and claims can provide an opportunity to change the narrative of the sector. And this will support us also to go to emerge from the pandemic with this value of sustainability and credibility in mind. And of course, they can also be important to understand the products and behavior sustainability impact. So they're key in that. And they can really help to make the shift on circularity. That was a topic that we discussed a lot during the past 1 day and a half. And they create also an opportunity for all of us to be game changers, because at the end, all of us are consumers. And so this is, actually, they have a powerful role at that moment for sustainability and circularity. And I would really like to thank you, both of you. Thank you, Emanuele, and thank you, Simon. It was really a pleasure to discuss all of this with you, and looking forward to our other discussion on the topic. And if there are no other questions from the audience, I think I can give back the floor to Virginia to close the session. We'll leave it there.
Thank you very much, Claudia. So this morning we've talked about what is business process analysis. We heard a little bit about the challenges in doing the business process analysis in textiles and leather. We've discussed the business claims and how to do them correctly, and what are some perspectives from the private sector and government. So now I want to encourage you to come back on time after lunch, because we have a really interesting session after lunch, which is a continuation of this session, where we're going to discuss in more detail what were the results from the textile business process analysis, what were the results from the leather, and then Piera Francesca Solinas is going to also talk to us about risk analysis. I mentioned this yesterday. This is a very important part of sustainability and claims is risk analysis. How do you decide where to focus your attention and where to focus your investment? So that's an important session for this afternoon, and I'm looking forward very much to hearing these presentations that time.
Thank you, Virginia.
Thank you very much.
Okay, good. Thank you, Emanuele. Grazie. Grazie. Siamo più in onda.
Okay, thank you very much, Virginia, for the wrap-up on this session on the business process analysis. Thank you to you and Claudia for leading on the session, and to our panelists from Candiani, Denim, and from ACCREDIA, Simone, Emanuele. It was enriching, I mean, listening to your points and to your highlights. I'll make a brief recap when we restart this afternoon, so sharp at 2. Thank you, everyone, for your attention. Have a nice lunch break, and to participants online for having been with us this morning. And we look forward to engaging this afternoon. Post your comments, questions on chat to interact with speakers and panelists. Thank you, and have a nice lunch break. See you at 2. Thank you.